All right, we are live now. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you once again in our Leaders Cafe Live. Welcoming everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. This is our 10th edition of our Leaders Cafe LinkedIn Live series, calling this Startup to Scale Up, Building the Next Generation Leaders. There's one statistics that didn't sit very comfortably to me is 65% of startups fail because of people problems. On top of that, team leaders within the startup community are often first time managers themselves. According to research, 60% of all new managers fail within the first 24 months of their position. And the main reason they fail is that they were not trained properly on how to lead effectively. Because we know it's not unusual for competent leaders and competent individual contributors to take on that position as we start scaling and start growing. And especially in a startup environment where the name of the game is agility, speed, and execution. And having people become overnight leaders is the biggest challenge that this community and this ecosystem faces. It's, in other words, learning on the go, picking up valuable skills in a startup's environment is extremely crucial. And you can acquire that over the job, but being effective leaders overnight can be challenging. So today in our live, we're going to be discussing some probably secret ingredients from somebody who's been highly successful in starting up, growing eventually, making a unicorn of his hard efforts, group of companies, and also now pretty popular, a TV personality, a shark from the Shark Tank series season 2. So I want to introduce you to our special guest, Amit Jain. Welcome, Amit.
Hi everyone. Hi Sandra.
Hi. Amit is the CEO and co-founder of India's leading auto tech company, CarDekho. He's an alumni of IIT Delhi. He started his career with Trilogy, a multinational corporation based in the United States, and later quit his engineering job to become the co-founder of one of India's leading auto tech companies. This seems to be like a fairy tale story, but I'm going to continue. Starting his journey with his brother Anurag Jain from a small makeshift office in his home garage in Jaipur, he successfully transformed the company into a unicorn, which is now valued at $1.2 billion. Amit is counted as India's leading entrepreneurs who's leveraged innovation and technology to completely transform the service in this country. Not limiting his entrepreneurial success to auto tech sector, he later launched the country's largest B2B insure tech called InsuranceDekho, leading bike and college portals, BikeDekho and CollegeDekho respectively. His fintech venture, Rupee, is now a successful business with over 13% market share in used car finance in India. His range of business ventures has made him one of the most influential entrepreneurs and is also the newest shark in the popular television series Shark Tank Season 2. Once again, welcome, Amit. I'm so excited to have you on the show once again.
Thank you for having me over, Sandra.
Super. I've often, when I partnered with our clients in this space, we've talked about there's so much of plethora of what leadership skills are about. One is working with people, but for me, a true leader, and in this space, maybe you'll resonate, is great leaders who've come and gone, and legends like you can think of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, who's around, have a characteristic of an eagle-like vision with the ability to both see the reality as well as make accurate predictions about the future. Their vision is big and focused to produce big results. And I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, I heard you once tell me that you want to kind of have a venture that takes you to the moon. That's your big dream that you want to look at. So, how do you find and create those eagles in an organization?
I think it first begins with you yourself. When you go through a grind, you're basically looking at a vision that you're basically pursuing, and your team of young people around you. I think the culture plays a very big role in this, and If you start finding happiness in seeing somebody else bloom, I think that's when it starts to change. I'll like talk about my journey between 7 to 15, 16 range. It was all about how what I can achieve. And then there's a flip switch somewhere in me which was like what we can achieve, and then there was a third flip that happened, then what he can achieve that will make me proud. What I've realized is, I have you have to be a good human being to be a good eagle first. So there's no all good leaders are always good human beings first in my view. And the common trait that I see in each great leader is, they empower their teams. They mentor, that they act like mentors versus managers, right? And that's the biggest difference in creating eagles. So at Girnar, for example, CarDekho Group, we have how the founders, they're treated like founders, empowered like one. They take their decisions. They have like I ran the company in a particular format, and I enjoyed the luxury of having empowerment, taking decisions, building a culture, lean agility. All these were DNAs. So what you start doing is you start picking up people who are kind of culturally aligned to you. You see that they have ability to see the big picture. So I think a big eagle will be able to zoom in what's the result for this year gonna be, and how the market is gonna look like in 5, 10 years. So what do I need to do today to see that, right? So he's a visionary along with a great execution for the current, and builds a team around himself like that. I think that's what I ended up doing myself. And then I
Mm,
was lucky enough to find incredibly talented people whom I could nurture home. Most of our founders are homegrown, so they were
mm,
fresh to insurance business. Ankit, for example, runs Insurance Dekho. We just raised 110 billion there at almost half a $1 billion valuation. The guy was actually on the street cutting his first insurance. So the ability to do execution and then zoom out and think
mm,
of how the company will grow 5 years out, 10 years out, that is an incredible capability in eagles normally. And I think you have eagles around you, you just don't empower them to have that
yeah,
normally as
yeah,
founders. And I
yeah.
think that plays a very big role on creating founders. Second, I think commercial constructs are also critical. When you say he's a founder, he should have equity like one of the founders, right? He should have skin
Mm,
in the game. He should
mm,
feel, that when I'm doing this, it's just I'm also doing for myself. When I realize my passion, there's a wealth creation also happening along with. I think that's
mm,
another part of creating eagle-like structure. So you want a company that can operate independently, practically, with the
mhm,
culture of those. I think
mhm,
culture that touched first is even more important because
yeah.
you have a DNA in which you have got brought up, and I would say that identifying somebody who imbibes your cultural values is a must for founder to find next. Typically, companies try to hire laterally, and reality is that it doesn't really work well in many cases because of this reason that the ethos or culture or philosophy with which the founder built the company may not be exactly replicable to lateral hires. So I always encourage people to find the eagles within.
Mm, mm. Very interesting point. I love the concept of Ivy and then he. I would call them they because you don't know who we are looking at. But I also, and I know I use some names like the legends, people who you kind of resonate with, who have a brilliant idea, and they're also the executioner. They are the feet on the street first, creating, designing, selling, and then identifying these eagles for themselves. But there's one quality, and if I could be controversial here, I see is a challenge is in terms of those eagles being great coaches. You look at the example of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and whereas they were brilliant and they probably in their ways created dents in universe, and but having that patience and time and cultivating, because coaching becomes a very slow process, and in that speed of running when you are scaling up, this sometimes can be one is developing that skill set and also having the patience to create. So how does one bridge that gap between speed, execution, mentoring, moving fast, and then stepping back? Coaching is more from just giving that space, them listening to them, going a bit slow, not soaring high up but being on the floor, ears on the ground.
I think when the company is in very initial stages, the answer is different, and when it's in a little more evolved stage, the answer is very different. When you're in a very early stage, you don't want too many people deciding what should be done because you lose agility. So, as a founder, you have to step on the driving seat, and basically choose the right people to be on the right seats in the bus, and you drive it basically. And
Hmm.
if you have too much democracy at that point, you won't be able to get the product market fit or the agility that you need. But as the same idea starts evolving and the business becomes larger, the teams are getting larger. So one guy can't run the whole show. Obviously, you need more empowered voices around you, people who can also tell you no, because founders are not used to listening no, in terms of having an openness to kind of get to a point where my idea is the best. I've executed it,
Hmm.
I've whatever I've touched has converted gold. So when you come to that stage, later stage, when you've scaled it to a particular zone in your own product market fit, I think at that point you have to let go, and that's the most difficult piece, because you have not been doing that for all these years. And that's the challenge I also face, and that's when I took up coaching myself, because I had never run a company that large. So I
Hmm.
had every year for me is a new year, for simple reason that every year I have a company larger, 70% larger than last year. And
Hmm.
if I
Hmm.
think about it, I have to learn new skills to handle this new large company every year, right? And I think that's where probably I think the coaching has really helped me, because I initially, if I will take you back in 14, 15, 16, I was not a very good listener. I was not the guy, asking the right questions, the BGQs that we call them, to get the answer from the person, versus I was a solver. I would give answers, solutions to every problem that I would hear. Is do
Yeah.
it like this, इसको ऐसे कर ले, इसको ऐसे कर ले. But
True. Hmm.
reality is that made you the choking point in a way. And I
Hmm.
realized that in 14, 15, 16, that this scale of this company is getting to a stage where if I run it this way, the company will not be agile. Company will
Hmm.
wait for my decision making, and
Yeah.
that's not fruitful. So I stepped back and thought, what do I really want? I want
Hmm.
people to make decisions like me. How,
Hmm.
why do I take decisions in certain format? So firstly, I stepped back and thought, I have got some core principles, philosophy of making decisions. If I'm able to educate my team on how I take decisions, that will make them kind of replicate, if not 100%, maybe right there 80, 90% on most of the times on the philosophy of decision making. Second
Hmm.
thing I realized was I have more context. So leaders are great. I have great leaders, but I have a lot more context than each one of them, because I am
Hmm.
exposed to a lot more knowledge, data, information. So I
Hmm.
made sure that let's have all verticals see every data, every single strategy, so that they are equally well equipped. I started to do Monday SLT meetings, senior leadership team meetings, and whatever meetings I've had in the week, whatever I had learned, I would document and translate it to my team, so that the knowledge gap does not exist. Because
Hmm.
there's no good decision, bad decision. Somebody taking a good decision just has more context.
Hmm.
I had more context than them, obviously, because I was meeting investors on one side. I was meeting so many dealers talking about all verticals. They were talking about only their verticals. So I had
Hmm.
little more macro
Hmm.
knowledge. I think that
Hmm.
helps take a more holistic decision. So I realized the importance of that. So philosophy, core value system, context. Once you do that, then third part is ownership of decision, which is the most difficult part. How do you not take the decision yet guide the team to take the right decision and own the thing? So when something comes from as if it's your solution, so as a leader, to step back and ask the right questions to lead the person to take that decision that you want. I think
Hmm.
that's the most tricky part. That's what I learned while getting coached on how do
Hmm.
you ask those questions which can lead to the right answers and thus right decision making, versus telling this is better. I think
Hmm.
that's probably the most trickiest part that I had to go through. If you ask me, am I still there? At times, I want to take that decision faster. It takes a little bit of time, but you create more accountable, ownership-led teams if you go the path where you let them discover the answer and where they feel it's their own. I think that's probably I would say I'm 80% there. Still 20% cases I try to know save some time and try to get the decision done faster. Having said that, in those 20%, the execution is not as great because the person running it doesn't own it. So
Yeah.
there's very little value in doing that path, in my view. So I think this is how you probably evolve: short teams versus large teams, and that's when you have to change your style.
Yeah. I love the way you've kind of taken the whole journey of a founder to CEO, where you
Yep.
shared there was my idea, my design, my execution, and then kind of got choking. It seems to me that coaching was like a point for you where you paused and you said, okay, what do I want next? A lot of self-reflection that came for you. And then you went on from moving to context value and the third thing you talked about ownership. How do we build that? And I think if I could double click on anything, was the powerful word is let go, especially
Yeah.
for a founder. And when I work with some founders as well, because the biggest asset for founders passion. You get into a business which is not easy. Running business is absolutely not easy, and every entrepreneur can raise their hand and say that. You're there because you're very passionate and you believe in what you're doing, and that sometimes can also get you to hold on to my idea, my thought, my process. And
True
that's
that.
where I think is, for me, it's the tipping point, the fence where you move from a founder to a CEO, where you're the chief executive getting things done with the large vision you're looking at. So beautiful that that journey kind of helps people also kind of take that shift, take that gap, that how much do I need to let go and what I need to kind of move forward. um, I'll use that as a segue getting into, how we look at diverse leaders. Now, you have an organization of extremely diverse leaders, and not just background. There's also age and experience. How do you manage this generational diversity, and how do you skill them to be great people leaders in this environment? Is there a
I,
systematic approach? Do you have like an approach to get them at that level?
I think there are two aspects. One is coaching that I'll discuss later. But I think in the first place, when you have age diversity, right? At that point, it's very important in the company culture that are they being treated like peers, or the age gap is reflecting in the conversation. So are they in the room asking questions, uh, contributing in the meeting, or they are being uh, just being used to sit in the room and just listen, right? I think that's where the difference lies in how people become leaders. When you give them exposure, like I'll give you an example of ours. When in 2014, when we would used to have board meetings, we would get 30, 40 people of our company, the next generation leaders, in the meeting,
Hmm.
and each of them would come present something. Also, it was not Amit giving the presentation.
Hmm.
I had realized it early that you have to create these young boys into leaders, start exposing them early, and the
Hmm.
meetings our meetings would run for 3 4 hours, and each one would have those 10 15 minutes, and each one would listen to other. I think there was a huge amount of peer learning happening in that process. And of those 40, many of them are still here, many of them have left. But whoever has gone out also is either entrepreneur or a leader now, because they
Hmm.
got exposed at a very young age, just out of college. Uh, this kind of environment. I think Girnar probably, I think, has been created in a very empowered environment, which has helped me have lesser stress and tension, because I personally feel everybody here is the owner of their own vertical, owner of their own stuff, and
Hmm.
they put their heart out. I think
Hmm.
that's one part. So the age thing basically was never a issue. As I came in, I was at least 10, 15 years older than any of my leaders back then, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think exposure creates a lot of difference, and how you treat them, how you give them, peer treatment versus
Hmm.
boss is very, very critical. Second is the
Hmm.
listening trait. As a leader, I have to listen to my young generation people. So what
Hmm.
I've done in my team, like every year I rotate my people I work with directly, and I have like fresh out of college people working with me, and that kind of makes me learn also, because look,
Hmm.
I may not be able to relate to the current generation because I was born in certain other generation,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
getting the thoughts of the younger ones to understand the market better.
Hmm.
Like Instagram became very popular. I'm not from Instagram days. I'm from Facebook days. Now
Hmm.
I'm an active Instagram user, right? And then somebody in young Gen Z is teaching me, what to do, how Insta works, and how brands should, leverage that. I think there is a phenomenon which is like shifting every, and I would say it's not even a 10 year. It's like a 5 year gap when people have changed
Yeah.
significantly. How they use technology, how they manifest technology in their daily lives is so different. So
Yeah.
as a leader, my job is to know what's happening now, because my company, to survive the test of time, will require these young minds to teach me. So it's not always about you teaching them. Actually, if you have a mode or a zone in which you can proudly say, I learn from my team, this Gen Z teaches me this, I think that's where the beauty of the whole thing lies.
Hmm.
How, as you move in the journey, as you make them feel more ownership led, they automatically start taking a lot more accountability. They start showing uh, reflecting your traits in a way. So if you at a top position as a leader behave in certain format, you will realize that so many people are observing you. So many people are observing you. They kind of imbibe your style in a way if they work directly with you, how empathetic you are, how you treat people, how you react in a meeting. So, as a leader, it's very important that what you want to happen with your customer, you should do with your team. Because
Mm,
finally, it's a cascade. What you do with your directs will happen to their directs until the last leaf node. And that last leaf node is interacting with your consumer. So, if you don't
mm,
do good behavior treatment here,
mm,
that now coming to the main point, you will have very rock star people but not good people managers, and that's where most of the companies kind of fail to realize how detrimental it can be to the long term strategy. Because
yeah.
if you have leaders who are very toxic while they deliver great results, but the
Mm,
team is not happy under them, you can go this far, but no further. So you'll be able to scale for short term, but long term, you'll be losing your customers, you'll be losing your people, you'll have a toxic culture which does not allow you to have a great brand value outside.
mm, mm,
That's the important part. If you identify such people, you work
yeah.
hard on them and coach them
Mm,
to change. Some people are coachable, some people really are not. You'll have to let them go also at times. He may be a
mm,
rock star, but cultural ethos are more important than individuals, is how I see
mm,
organization. You're asking
mm.
something.
Yeah, yeah. Every time I come up with a question, you're giving the answer before the question comes. So I'm just enjoying this. But my question was this: when you get rock stars and they're giving you the numbers you want, but they are toxic, they're not developing the people. What decisions do you do? And you said either coach them or let them go as well. And it's
And in
critical
addition,
because
just to complete the answer, we also very structural interventions. So we have a leadership development program running through the year where we are identifying the nation leaders. We have a manager coaching also happening through the year.
Mhm,
There is a
mhm,
very structured intervention at CarDekho Group which we do to
mm,
build nation leaders, and there are
mm,
very structured coaches who come take classes. There are one-on-one formats also of coaching. There are one-on-many also. So we have got both formats running through the year with very seasoned coaches who are basically uh, telling the ideology of as a manager, your success is in your people. So if you
yeah.
have 20 people with you and you're able to get all 20 to your level, you're a
Mhm,
great manager, so
mhm,
that you can go to the next layer, right? And that's how basically
yeah.
people need to be really coached, how you behave with your, how you provide feedback.
Yeah.
Biggest problem I have seen in India, at least, is managers are not able to give a feedback, which feedback is to improve, feedback is not
Mm,
to criticize. And it's
yep.
very, it's a simple coaching, but it's so such an important coaching exercise that really is needed across India, because rock stars become managers eventually because they're performing well. But once they reach there, they're not
Yeah.
they're rock stars to execute, but not to manage.
It's
It's
a
a different
different
skill,
beast altogether.
skill
Getting,
completely, right?
yeah,
And that's where most of the organizations struggle, and
yeah,
that's where the structured intervention is very critical to make this happen.
yeah, yeah. And I know this is like obvious. Don't, it's like smoking is injurious to health. Yeah, people smoke. We know leadership development or developing your people is important. But now with what's happening within the industry and some section of the industry is where there are retrenchments happening, there's focus happening, there's watching on your cash happening. And history has told us day in and day out, from whether it was COVID, whether it's retention, whether it's a recession, leadership development, people development is the first thing that gets flicked out of your budgets, because that is not seen as important. Now, it's a difficult question to answer. The answer is obvious, it's important. How does, for example, if there is a leader sitting, a founder sitting who's listening to this and is facing this pressure right now, whether it's an investor pressure, investor on cash crunch. Now, what decision, what can he do with this limited time resources?
So I think obviously survival of the company should be foremost.
Hmm,
So there's no doubt about it. So as a
hmm,
founder, if I were to advise, first think of survival. Once you're basically having enough cash to survive, then let's talk about what we're about to discuss. Because if you can't survive, then company won't even exist. So
hmm,
answer is very simple. First, survival is the most important thing.
hmm,
Now, let's say if you have 12 months of cash runway, you have a
hmm,
team that's gonna kind of run that 12 month of cash that
Mm.
you're left with, or 6 months of cash. It doesn't matter what amount you're left with. Now, if you basically want the best outcome, you will have to have great leadership coming in. And if you don't have leaders who can actually adjust to this crisis situation, and most of the time leaders are not accustomed to crisis situations. That's the biggest problem. They've
Yeah.
all seen good growth. That's why they're leaders. They've reached on top. They have done well in their careers. Every time it was a great situation, and they're the
Mm.
first time, or very few times in their career they've seen a situation where capital cycles have turned,
Mm.
and now they have to let go people. They have to take hard decisions, and this is something which is personally disturbing to most of the leaders, right? And
Yeah.
I think this requires training. How do you handle the
True.
situation? If
Mm.
I were to basically put it straight, if you're about to get into a crisis, getting this coaching done on how to handle crisis, how to handle people is the most
Mm.
important training you can give to leaders, because you have to be very empathetic while all these things are happening. And if you don't do this, there's a bigger problem. The people who have gone will go. But the bigger problem would be the people who are left will
Yeah.
observe how you let them go. That's a bigger problem. Because if they see that you did not do this with respect, dignity, and empathy required as a leader, then imagine what trust or loyalty you have of the people who are left with you. So
Yeah.
I would say that when crisis situations occur, the leadership coaching becomes more important rather to
Mm.
demonstrate the right culture, right ethos on how to do it.
Mm. Absolutely. And then you may lose all your star performance. You're left with people you don't want, also. That
Correct.
could also be a situation.
That's what usually happens when you basically are not running it effectively.
Yeah.
That's where leadership becomes very critical in such
Mm.
situations.
Yeah.
People don't work for money anymore, Sandra.
Mm.
People work for environment, a culture, empowerment, a passion.
Mm.
पैसा मिल जाता है आजकल. You get the money these
True.
days.
True.
I think
True.
there's something more needed.
Absolutely. In fact, the overall outlook for Indian millennials and Gen Z is the second most optimistic in 40 countries, as per a Deloitte. And because they've expressed confidence about having the future skills, they don't want authoritative, they believe in trust, openness, transparency. It's not about money, it's about feeling inspired and motivated and feeling like you are contributed.
Correct.
Purposeful vision, right?
And you're able to see what impact I'm creating even at a lowest level to the big picture. If you can relate to that, I think that's the most beautiful piece as an
Yeah,
organization create.
true, true. I also know as leaders, and not just founders and CEOs, senior leaders also, every leader goes through a phase and maybe many phases of burnout and also lacking inspiration and sometimes confidence in yourself. Is there a personal story you have that you can share where someone's going through, or to share how you come out or you've experienced somebody come out, or somebody who's going through it? I've gone through definitely phases of feeling uninspired and feeling burnt out, but there is a lot of work being leaders and doing it on your own and coming out of it on your own. Is there any tips, insights that you can share for somebody who's struggling right now?
Look, I think firstly I've been through many failure phases, but I've never felt really, really burnout. And the reason is that I was surrounded by very loving people with great intent, with no biases for me, right? And it's my brother Anurag, who's my co-founder. So I always had him as a partner whenever, and we spend like an hour every night chatting about things. Whenever I'm down, he's the one who lifts my spirits up, because fundamentally what we discuss is gratitude towards life. We have got more than what we deserve, and feeling down in such a situation is meaningless, because we in any case have got a lot more than what we deserve, right?
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
practically step back from the problem statement, it's about how much you seek. That's
Mm.
the real problem. If you're content with what you have,
Yeah.
that takes you to a very different zone. You burn
Mm.
out because you're working hard, not getting the desired results, versus feeling I will enjoy the effort versus the results.
Mm.
I enjoy my efforts,
Yeah.
and I enjoy the hard work I do. I do not chase the outcomes. I rather chase the inputs. And
Mm.
inputs are something that you can give. You may not get the final result. That's okay. But
Mm.
inputs what inspires me. In fact, while I do internal meetings, also it's not about what result you got. It's about
Mm.
what effort we put in. And if
Mm.
the result did not come, what can we do differently next time to have a
Mm.
different outcome? If you keep on
Mm.
doing the same thing and expect different outcome, that won't happen. We'll have to change something fundamentally to get a different outcome.
Mm.
That's one. Second, I think when you're really feeling down, meet your family more often, meet your close friends more often, where you're not judged. Because in your company, you would not be able to speak to your leadership team
Yeah.
about your challenges, about your emotional journey that you're going through. And as
Mm.
founder, you have to have somebody whom you can confide in. If not,
Mm.
find a mentor whom you can talk to. So I
Mm.
try to always have a mentor who has run a much larger company than me all the time. So I connect with the mentor more often. In every
Mm.
stage, I had have different mentor because company of my size also kept on growing. So
Yeah.
I would always want to take advice from somebody who has run a much larger ship, and of
Mm.
course I keep in touch with the previous ones also. But I think that also helps a lot in having somebody who can see through what's happening and actually objectively talk about it with you, uh, and talk about how he probably handled is a very good way to kind of overcome such a situation. Lastly, I think enjoy your work every
Mm.
day. Burnout is something that happens because you're not enjoying what you're doing.
Mm.
If you're not enjoying, just stop doing it. Don't just drag it out, because if you burnout happens over a period of time and you
Mm.
keep dragging yourself into it every day, and then you
Mm.
start feeling burnt out.
Mm.
You're putting all those hours and not really enjoying that. Why are you doing that? So I
Mm.
have realized, it's at times it's better to rise from ashes and
Yeah.
reinvent yourself, pivot to something new versus trying to pursue something that may not be working. But just be persistent about it, which
Yeah.
means that you will find your way. Just be persistent, and perseverance goes a long way. You can keep on changing the idea. I'll take a real example. I was running a e-commerce site in 2009-10 called shopdekho.com. We would sell mobiles,
Mm.
and when we were selling mobiles, Flipkart and all these guys were coming in. There were too many sites. We were self-funded, no external funding picked. So we had knack of getting traffic. So our traffic was free, so there was no customer acquisition cost as per se. And we started selling good number of mobiles.
Mm.
And in shipment, mobiles started getting lost. Infrastructure of delivery was not very good. And then suddenly Flipkart and all other people started putting huge discounts on the same phone. So we started making huge losses per phone, and we realized we don't have money to kind of pursue this. We reinvented ourselves that all these guys want to borrow. Let's
Mm.
make a price aggregation site, and we started Price Deco, where we stopped selling but started giving consumer options where he can get the cheapest. We
Ah.
started showing
Mm.
all these sites, and then we pivoted. I said,
Mm.
let's not stress over this, and then
Mm.
that started generating 50-60 lakhs a month, and in no
Mm.
time it was crore a month, right? So the
Mm.
traffic kind of pivoted into a new thing. So I'm saying rise from your ashes means
Mm.
is I should shut that venture down to start this
Mm.
one.
Mm.
That was profitable for me at least.
Yeah.
I lost all my money once in 8-9 market crash, and we did not
Mm.
even have money to pay salaries, and it was a small setup of 100 people, and we were investing in future and options, and we were highly leveraged, like 1:10, and in
Mm.
4 5 years we had practically zero bank balance. And that was a time, you go low, you feel, underconfident. That story I distinctly remember. I was sitting with my brother on that night with zero cash balance. We had to figure out how to pay salaries and not let the team know that we've lost all the money. So that show does goes on with no
Mm.
turbulence in the company. It was
Mm.
my mistake that I was trying to grow the money too fast without realizing that I should be more accountable. That was a learning back then.
Mm.
I think the biggest thing that happened that night was, Anurag told me, Amit, we made this in 2 years from
Mm.
zero, and we know how to get here, and God has given us hands and brains. So it would take lesser time this time to get where we were, right? And that was more encouraging, soothing. Nobody pointed fingers. Ki it happened because
Mm.
of happened because of you. It was
Mm.
like unconditional support, right? You need
Mm.
to have a partner with you who can give you that unconditional love, unconditional support, because somebody who knows that your intent was great, but
Mm.
the outcome was this, right? But the
Yeah.
intent was, if the intent is not at question, then you don't feel that burnt out, because that burden of performing all the time,
Mm.
proving all the time is not there.
Yeah. 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 And I think what you said is very important because when you surround yourself, you become those people as well. So you surround yourself with people who are inspiring and motivating you, then you get more energy to inspire and motivate yourself. And I do want to call this out, not part of the questions as well. there's always this thing whether you should partner with family, right? Have a family member the partner, because it can go either way. It can tear the family apart, or it can, get them stronger. And I've often over the years heard you acknowledge Anurag a lot, which says a lot that it's beyond just, brothers getting together with a bright idea, but over the years, and hearing your anecdote stories about failures, and how instead of, pulling each other down, you just said, no, that's all right, let's do it. That was a very powerful line that your brother said. I did it in 2 years. Imagine now we can do it in half the time, or less than that. Is there anything that the two of you had like created boundaries for yourself, saying ki, brothers first, partners later, these things where you are dangerously close to losing your relationships, and then you've pulled yourself back, or just happened
I
unconsciously?
think what happens, Sandra, is in the family now. This first, I'll speak about a story, and then I'll come to this. What happens is family is bound with common family value system. So when my father died in 2006, we had all our friends come for condolences, and people flew from various locations. Some people came from USA for this, right? My friends and his friends, and everybody stayed for 5 6 days, and everybody left. And finally, what is left in the house after those 7 days is your own core family. Remember that, when the crisis will happen, you'll have great friends will come, but they can't be part of that journey with you through. So your
Mm,
family will be the only entity that will be going through your crisis for the full time. Value that.
yeah.
So that value system got created much earlier because you're a joint family. Second, I think the biggest problem in families that happen is, when people start thinking, I have put in this effort, these results are because of me. Other guy is not working hard enough, right? Or the amount of effort being put in is lower.
Mm,
But if you start valuing this part, that crisis will come, and I value this part more than the other part of, who's creating more wealth. I think
yeah.
that's when it all dissolves into a very
Mm,
intentful relationship, which is
mm,
not based on, wealth created, effort put in. Lastly, I think have lesser number of boundaries in which you have to interact with each other, so that you can have your areas of decision making, and
mm,
you don't overlap on decisions. That I have a point of view, he has a
mm.
point of view. We try
Yeah.
to demarcate them very, very clearly, so that we don't have a day-to-day struggle. So
Yeah.
he has his area, I have my area, and very important decisions we take together, which can have a financially a huge impact. That's where I consult Anurag, or he is allowed to consult with me, or I am allowed to consult with him. We also generally every day connect, like every night we live in the same house. So when we sit for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I give a brief of what has happened through the day. He gives me his brief. It's like chatting up. So you have a lot
Mhm.
of context. So if you are family founders, make sure you share context, because
Mm,
you hear something, but if you have full
yeah.
context about what is happening with them, you will
Mm,
not judge. You will have a reason why it happened, right?
yeah.
So that passing on context becomes very critical also on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. And with a partner like that, do you or have you ever felt lonely on the top?
Luckily, I've not felt lonely ever on the top, and I
Mm,
think it's been uh, there have been phases, small phases where you might have felt so, but
mm,
I notice this because you don't speak up when you're down. You try to not always open up,
yeah.
but the other person who loves you so much notices it automatically, and
Yeah.
he breaches the topic in a way, right? And
Yeah.
if you have some people like that around you, I think that
Mm,
changes.
yeah. Yeah. I can see that smile that brings out, the beautiful relationship the two of you have in going through, the failures and successes together, celebrating each other. That's amazing. So do you feel it's always great to have co-founders, or what would
I
you
think
recommend somebody
I think
setting up a company?
co-founders with which intent will never be questioned is very important.
Mm,
I've seen in Indian ecosystem startup, a lot of co-founders have quit, fought, left, right? I think you have to have first basic principle is that have trust, and that's the intent piece. That if you trust the intent, then everything else is how we execute it versus intent is bad, right? So I think that trust is very critical, and I think no startup is ever created with mistakes. And I think probably I've seen things go haywire when you raise a lot of money, and one founder becomes more important than the other one. He probably gets
mm,
starts more
yep.
publicity. There are emotional stuff. I think that's where it starts to diverge,
Mm,
and that's where the person in charge. has to balance and make sure that there's an open channel, heart-to-heart conversations, equal
Mm,
visibility, things like
mm.
those, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty tricky to do that. It's not so easy, but yeah, you have this unconscious competition or competitive streak that comes in with two co-founders. But I'm glad you're kind of managing that and are doing well. I've got some rapid round questions for you really quickly, quick answers. So, one is choose one between the two, which is the first one is massive growth, that is be in history books, or live in people's hearts.
Live in people thought any day.
Okay.
Look, I'm a guy who believes that I will live through others,
Hmm.
and if I can leave an impact with next generation, I'll be living in their thoughts, and my thoughts will be going to the next one. So I want to have a life which basically is acknowledged by many for learning from me,
Hmm.
and that is where I'll live. Because everybody is, finally everybody is to die one day, but
Yeah.
I will live through the thoughts. I'll live through people I have, worked with. I'll live through people I have coached myself, people who are founders now, and their
Hmm.
next generation, because my thoughts will translate into next generation of them. I think that brings a lot more pleasure than anything else.
A very smart answer. You're getting into history also. So, through people's lives, you're getting into the next generation in history. Nice one. I like that. Okay. Now, if you were to write a book on your journey, what would the title be?
What will title be? Street Fighter is probably how I would title it. I've been a street fighter all my life. Roughed it up, went to ground, did was a telecall of 6 months in my own company. Have sold
Hmm.
my first pack to the dealers. I've zoomed in, zoomed out. So I'm like more like a street fighter guy who rose to this position finally. And I think I value that phase of street fighting the most versus running this one, because you were actually, I could not have reached here without that phase. So I think I will probably title it Street Fighter Founder, a story of a street fighter kind of a thing.
Ah, nice. I like that story of a street fighter. Super. What is your go to productivity hack?
Go to productivity hack. I think I have something. So I think you also have been part of that. I think you have coached me also in past. So I think I use some tricks from that. I think the 6 by 6 6 6, where I hold on to my reaction, think through, and then answer things. I think that pause is very critical for before you go about. That's one hack I have definitely used. Second hack I've used was also learned between two of us. I When I feel a little down, I put my pictures, kids' pictures on screen, and I play a
Hmm.
meditation music. That kind of changes the zone in which you are.
Yeah.
Third, I think that's something I always do. I don't start ever a meeting with numbers or no, let's get to work. I try to ask some personal questions all the time, which are like how was the weekend. I know my team very personally, so I know their wives, I know what's happening in family. If
Hmm.
somebody's father is not well, I would first start with that, and then
Hmm.
come to after 5 7 minutes of general catch up, I'll move on to the real work, right? And I think that helps me get context of the person's in personal life. So
Hmm.
when numbers are not good and I know personal life is in turbulence, I know the context on
Yeah.
who needs help rather than a
Beautiful.
beating on number, right? You know what I mean? So I think that productivity hack kind of really helps me connect better with my people, and
Yeah.
that creates a culture of empathy within the organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
That's so
lastly,
powerful. Yeah.
I think I love to read every single consumer review that comes, and I love to pass it on to my teams to build. So I believe that you have to be better company every day, a better version of your product, better version of your team every day, and I think reading that gives me a constant kick to transform the company on a daily basis. Forget about month, year. Every day, one feedback can help you change a process that can make the company better, build some feature in the product that can make the company better. So I think the daily, gratification of in that kick of being a better version of your
Yeah.
own product company every day is something so satisfying.
Hmm.
That when I go home at night, I should feel happy how I look at it. I have to find 5 reasons in the day that will make me smile when I go back. That day was great. It was meaningfully accomplished. So I
Yeah.
find happiness in work somehow, and when I'm happy, I'm able to actually pass it on to people. So there's something called I acknowledge people, right? No, you have to acknowledge your team, anybody for that matter, right? So, and the happiness you pass on is visible. So if you
Yeah.
do that more
Yeah.
often, I think that's something I've realized that people go do wonders when they're acknowledged, when they're
Yeah.
recognized, and when they're asked to do things beyond their potential. They actually jump in with full
Yeah.
passion, without fear. I think
Yeah.
that's the hacks I've used, at least in my
True,
own style.
true. Yeah. And the last 2 points, Amit, you've actually touched upon, when we talk about the emotionally intelligent leader, one of the skill sets required to be a strong leader is to be able to have that empathy and connect. And the team meeting example that you gave is, first check in with people before you check in with the numbers. We often call it the neck down and neck up approach. So first find neck down. Where are your people in this moment emotionally? With the checking with their state, and then you get a lot of answers on your neck up, which then you get into your numbers. That's a brilliant example to start. Yeah.
And there's one more strategy I follow. Let's say if I was not good in meeting, and I personally believe, I after every meeting I have to ask a question to myself: when this meeting is over and the team goes out, are they
Mhm.
motivated to do better or are they down? If the answer is the latter, then I'm not a good leader myself, right? So I have to answer this question every single meeting to myself. And if the case is latter, then I have to pull up back again, which means I have to do a personal call
Mhm.
and talk about how I was not a better leader today in the meeting. And I meant to tell you this, that I probably was not a good manager today. Right?
Mm. Mm.
Acknowledging your own mistake is very important at times, because you at times are not right and you know it in your heart, but you cannot
Yeah.
say it open. So I make sure that I'm able to acknowledge my own behavior, which is not right, because if I don't acknowledge that, the other guy who's working with me might think this is the right behavior, right? And that's not the right behavior at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You have to kind of walk the talk in this whole bit. Oops, we got into some beautiful insights and forgot a rapid round. But next quick one. If you had a time machine and you were to go back to the young Amit who's just starting off, and you had to give him one advice to do something differently, what would that be?
No, I think I would not give him any advice. I would let him discover, because there are a lot of learning in the discovery, in those
Hmm.
failures. I would want him to do the same thing, have those failures, because when you really do experience them firsthand, that's when you learn more. If I probably pass on, ye mat karna, don't do this, don't do that, because I know that this is gonna be detrimental to you, the
Yeah.
learning would be the thing. So I would actually let him go the same way. I think it's been a
Wow.
fantastic run. I've been very happy in the journey.
Super spoken by a person who's extremely satisfied with his life. No regrets.
No regrets.
Okay. Okay, this is second last. What animal or creature resonates with you the most? And you can't say
Tiger.
shark. Oh,
Tiger.
tiger. Why tiger? What
I
quality?
call my company members also tigers. I love the agility, the fierceness of a tiger, the way how fast it runs. So I
Mm-hmm.
always call my team a tiger. I'll address them as dear tigers. In
Ah.
my public town hall. So it's something that I have kind of related to all my life. I like the approach itself.
So you've got one big tiger painting in your office? No.
We have many actually. Our logo of all the missions are based on tigers.
Ah.
Mission when we did first 100 crore mission company to
Uh-huh.
do, like long back, it was called Mission 100 with half face of tiger and 100 here. Then
Mm.
missions kept on changing, but tiger is still there. The fierce
Mm.
tiger is still there.
Super. The tiger continues burning bright.
Yep.
Super. One last rapid fire question, then I move to the question that some of our audience have asked. And this is lastly, if a CEO were to ask you for one piece of outlandish advice to build a successful empire, what would it be? Just one piece of advice.
Be a good human being. Rest will follow.
And that's your outlandish advice. Be human.
Yeah.
You
Be a good
sometimes
human.
forget. Sometimes we forget the basics, right? Be kind. Be human. Yeah,
I think
that's a
that's what probably
foundation.
I would advise. I think rest all falls in place. Typically,
Mm,
if you're good with people, if you're doing things with genuinely pleasure in doing it for others versus the results, and
mm,
because you find your pleasure in somebody's happiness, I think that's where you evolve to a very different zone.
yeah, yeah. Super. There's a beautiful words to kind of close this by is be a good human, be kind. Be generous, acknowledge others. On that note, acknowledge others. I want to come back and acknowledge the audiences that's been here patiently listening to us and putting a lot of comments. There's some beautiful, I'm not sure whether you can see it, Amit, but there's some great comments here. But I'm just going to jump onto the questions so we are able to cover as many as possible. There's a question from Rajesh Lalwani who says that India presents a tremendous opportunity to scale. And we've seen a run up by companies, not only startups, that were and are able to raise capital and scale. But leverage also leaves you vulnerable, as we have seen with Adani. How do you find balance between scale and leverage? Your outlook and strategy.
My view always has been, fundamentally first create a playbook. Say if it's India is large, we all know it. It's there to capture, we all know it. I would talk about how about doing your idea in a city. If city is too large, how about doing it in a pin code? If pin code is too large, how about doing it in Adarsh Nagar, right? Keep on cutting the problem down to a very small place where you can create a playbook, prove that the unit economics of the transaction, the fixed cost of technology, of course, you won't be able to recover because you're building technology for future. So treat it like a amortized cost for future. But the transaction should start throwing cash. Consumer should be really happy with your service. NPA should be great. Once you've proven that in even a small mohalla, small city, I think you've got a playbook here. Now you know that this makes cash and this will cover all the costs that I'm going to invest later at a certain scale. Now, with this playbook, pick up three more areas or cities like this and prove that you have learned to run this process remotely, sitting in your headquarters in three other cities or two other cities. And the playbook is actually replicable. Once
Hmm.
you have done that, then say, I want to pick up money to now open pan India. And that's when your leverage is very safe. You know that you're generating cash. It's a fundamentally good company with good unit economics. And that's what I would recommend, how I would think about doing the startup here in India.
Okay. Beautiful. Yeah, it can be very tricky in kind of looking at how do you focus and balance both, but there's some great insights. Thanks for sharing. There's another question here from Najam Qureshi. Um, and his question is: should angel investor be taken or not? Hmm.
I think depends. If you're just taking money from angel, avoid because you will dilute a lot. If there is some really good guy who can strategically advise you, open network, which you find valuable, I think you should definitely look at angel there. And even if the money is less, the advice would be more important than money. I would say.
Hmm.
Try to
Hmm.
avoid angel as long as you can, because if you are building in the playbook model, I just said you require very little cash.
Hmm.
If you are basically getting co-founders who are coming without salary, nothing like it, right? And the equity is all the co-founders rather. And me
Hmm.
and Anurag are real examples. We raised money 7 years after we started up, and we
Hmm.
saved all our equity, which typically goes out very quickly, right? And
Hmm.
I think that's very important to realize. Are you raising money to survive, or are you
Hmm.
raising money to scale? So my recommendation is always try to be bootstrapped and raise money to scale, then survive.
Hmm. 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 Interesting. And I think the next question is kind of related by Prakash Chandra Patel. He says, hello, Amit. Do we really need a lot of funds to start a new company? Or the team of great resources with different skill set is enough to start? Please advise.
Money is immaterial. I don't know. We did not have any money. We just had money. Me and Anurag had money to buy two laptops, and we bought those two laptops. We rented our furniture. We had that shadi wali table, that marriage tables, that
Right.
lacquer table, and we had put white cloth so that it doesn't look ugly. Right. That's what the setup was for
Yeah.
us. Don't really need money in the new age of tech era. If you have a laptop, you know how to code. If you don't know how to code, get a co-founder who knows how to code. You will have enough. Then focus on hiring freshers. That's what we did. We got 5-10,000 rupee a month interns back then. We coached them. They still are with us. Somebody the CTO, somebody the CMO, and that DNA got translated. So 15-year-old people in our company, 14-year-old people in our company, they're all in leadership positions now. Those interns were exceptional because they were hungry. When they work with founders like you or me, they get exposed, and you won't believe how fast they are able to scale. We typically
Yeah.
think years of experience. I talk about experiences per year all the time. So the
Hmm.
person who joined us back then in 2007-8 probably lived 5 years in one year, and scaled is exposure to such a big scale because company was expanding so fast. So nurture your freshers. You can build it in a very low cost. Try choosing your own house or a rented flat to start with. Keep your costs low as you can. Be as frugal as you can. Just to give example, for first 3 4 years, I don't even remember taking a hotel. I would find a friend where I would go stay with, right? So I was that frugal, right? And I would use that Kali Pili taxi. I would not have that, luxury to have full time car at that. And it's like street fighter banna padta, bhai. You have to be a street fighter, when you are in that zone. So conserve your cash. Your cash is your runway. If you have got X capital, make it last longer, and you'll find a new way to pivot.
Yeah, yeah. A bootstrap street fighter.
Yup.
Yeah, interesting. I remember when we started with very old table. We had got an aunt who lent her table, and we had like again two laptops, and we started off. One of my kids' room became the office. But those are such beautiful stories, right? When you grow and you have so much more respect for resources and your own resources, and then you're able to grow. Super story. I'll just pick up one last question because we're running out of time. We have just 2 minutes left. And I love the questions just popping. I think people are just going with the flow. So Jagminder Sethi says, Hi Sandra and hi Amit. My question to Amit is about balancing between speed of scaling up versus reducing process complications, especially if growth is coming from adding new SKUs or customer propositions, which keep adding new process flows. What's the best approach?
I think try to keep it as simple as you can be. If you are creating too many process complications, your scale will be limited. If it requires a lot of technological intervention, your scale will be limited. So what I do normally is I try to solve with humans first and let the humans run the process. And if that scales up very well, then only I introduce technology. At least proof of concept is there that this can scale up with humans, and then you can eventually replace it with technology. You know it in your heart. So, but first show the scale. First show that it can actually go to that level before you start investing in a product that might never be used also. So I'm a little, a guy who wants to try things quickly rather than wait for perfect product to be built. And I can improve it. I know it. You will be a better version as you move on in the journey.
Yeah. And that's the second person who's told me that as well. There's another founder I spoke to, and she said the same thing. It's like if you have your people, and especially because the tech flows so much is overwhelming, everyone wants to get into tech. But just first get people to do it. And if you're able to create that flow, then jump into tech. Don't just jump into that immediately. These are some great questions. I'm sorry there's some more questions flowing, but I know Amit is really busy and I want to also respect everyone's time here to use this opportunity to wrapping up our conversation. And if it's okay, Amit, they can drop the question on your LinkedIn page, or if they have some questions that's still pending.
Yeah, sure.
If you do want Amit and team to have a look at that. Do want to thank you, Amit, for this time. There's some brilliant, brilliant ideas and insights you've shared. I love my favorite line was chase the inputs and not the output. If you chase the inputs right, you will get the outputs that you want. And just the ability of when I see you, I think humble, you haven't used that word, but just humbleness comes through in terms of just appreciating, giving everyone else the credit, and you using words like lucky, lucky. But I know it's not just luck in this whole process. There's a lot of hard work that goes in. So thank you once again. Wishing you all the best, and your car group companies continues growing, and we continue seeing more of you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sandra. Thank you, everybody who tuned and appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Speak to you soon next month. Bye bye.